All right, let's dive right in. We're about to pull back the curtain on one of the most disturbing chapters in modern history, Project MKUltra. This was the CIA's top secret, all out effort to build the ultimate weapon, total control of the human mind.
I mean, just think about that for a second. What if they could just reach into your head, erase your memories, and basically rewrite who you are? It sounds like something from a sci-fi movie, right? But this wasn't fiction. For more than 20 years, this was a very real government-funded mission.
You see, to really get why MKUltra even happened, you have to feel the paranoia of the Cold War. The US government was absolutely terrified that the Soviets had figured out brainwashing. I mean, they saw American POWs coming back from Korea, just different, like robots, confessing to things they never did. So the CIA decided they couldn't risk falling behind in this silent psychological arms race. And look, this whole thing didn't just pop up overnight. It was a slow, disturbing creep. It started right after World War II, bringing over Nazi scientists for their expertise. Then came these smaller projects, Bluebird and Artichoke, each one pushing the line a little further. By the time CIA Director Alan Dulles officially signed off on MKUltra in 1953, the fuse was already lit. He just poured gasoline on the fire.
And at the center of this whole web was one guy, Sidney Gottlieb. On the surface, he was this brilliant chemist, had a stutter, loved folk dancing. But inside the CIA, they had a different name for him, the Black Sorcerer. And he was basically given a blank check and a green light to do one thing, crack the code of the human brain, no matter what it took. So let's get into the experiments themselves. And I have to warn you, this is where it gets really, really dark. Gottlieb's whole philosophy was brutally simple. He believed that before you could build a new mind, you had to first completely shatter the one that was already there. This wasn't about science, it was about psychological demolition. And their number one wrecking ball? LSD. Gottlieb was obsessed with it. So obsessed that in 1953, the CIA spent $250,000, that's like $4 million in today's money, and bought up every last drop of LSD on the planet. The irony is just staggering. The same government that would later declare a war on drugs was, for a time, the world's biggest acid dealer. But LSD was just the tip of the iceberg. I mean, they had a whole toolkit of horrors. They were using hypnosis, trying to create real-life sleeper agents. They were locking people in pitch-black sensory deprivation tanks for days at a time, cranking up electroshock therapy to levels that were just insane. They even injected people with uppers in one arm and downers in the other just to see what would happen. And one of the most horrific techniques was something called depatterning. This CIA-funded doctor in Montreal, Ewan Cameron, would put his patients into drug-induced comas for months. And while they were unconscious, he would hit them with these massive jolts of electricity. We're talking 30 to 40 times the normal therapeutic dose. The goal was to literally erase their personality.
And once he'd wiped their minds clean, Cameron would start what he called psychic driving. He'd stick a speaker under their pillow and play a single looped message over and over and over again for weeks. Sometimes hundreds of thousands of repetitions. He was trying to write a new person onto that blank slate. The results? Utterly catastrophic. It just destroyed people.
So you have to ask, who were the people they did this to? Who were the guinea pigs in this nightmare? Well, the program was very clear about its strategy. In the cold words of one CIA officer, they targeted people who could not fight back.
And I mean, just look at this list. It's horrifying. They preyed on mental patients, on prisoners like the famous mobster Whitey Bulger, drug addicts, even children. But it didn't stop there. They went after everyday people too. You could be sitting in a bar, on a beach, and suddenly you're an unwitting subject in their experiment. No one was asked for consent. No one was safe.
This quote from Whitey Bulger, it just gives you a glimpse of the terror. He volunteered for what he was told was a cure for schizophrenia. Instead, they shot him up with LSD every single day for over a year. He said later, "I was in prison for committing a crime, but they committed a greater crime on me." And then there was this. It honestly sounds like a bad spy movie, but it was 100% real. It was called Operation Midnight Climax. The CIA literally set up and ran its own brothels. They hired prostitutes to lure men in, dose their drinks with LSD, and then had agents sit behind two-way mirrors just watching and taking notes. It's unbelievable. But when you play with this kind of darkness, eventually, it turns on you. And that brings us to Frank Olson. He was a CIA scientist, one of their own.
He had seen some of the ugliest parts of the program, and in 1953, at a CIA retreat, Sidney Gottlieb himself secretly slipped a massive dose of LSD into Olson's drink. 9 days later, Frank Olson was dead. He fell from a 13th floor hotel window in New York. The official story for years was suicide, but his family never believed it. Decades later, they had his body exhumed, and what they found, it changes everything. He had injuries on his head that happened before the fall. So, did he jump, or was he pushed? It really looks like he was silenced.
So you have to be wondering, how in the world did a secret like this ever get out? The truth is, it was almost buried for good. The only reason we know about it is because of the Watergate scandal in the 70s, which suddenly made everyone incredibly suspicious of what the government was doing behind closed doors. So in 1973, the CIA director gets spooked and illegally orders all the MKUltra files destroyed. And they almost succeeded. But then a bombshell newspaper report exposes other illegal CIA activities. That leads Congress to form a special committee to investigate. And here's the crazy twist. In 1977, investigators found the proof completely by accident. 20,000 pages of financial records that were just put in the wrong box. A simple clerical error is the only reason we know for sure that MKUltra was real. And when the truth finally came out, it just left this deep, permanent scar on the public's trust in its own government. This wasn't just some rogue mission. It felt like a fundamental betrayal. And that's a wound that has never really healed.
And what's just absolutely infuriating is that nobody was ever held accountable. For 2 decades of systemic torture on citizens, not a single person was prosecuted for it. The director who destroyed the evidence, he got a slap on the wrist, a $2,000 fine. And Sidney Gottlieb, the black sorcerer himself, he just retired quietly to a goat farm. That's it.
But its ghost is still everywhere. It's the inspiration for shows like Stranger Things. In a wild historical irony, it helped kickstart the 60s counterculture. Guys like Ken Kesey first tried LSD as part of a CIA-funded study. And of course, it became the foundation for countless conspiracy theories, some of which, well, they don't seem so far-fetched anymore.
Ultimately, the biggest legacy of MKUltra is what it did to our trust. It was terrifying proof that sometimes the most outlandish, paranoid things you can imagine can actually be real. It stands as this permanent blinking red light, warning us about the dangers of unchecked power operating in total secrecy. Which leaves us with one final, chilling question for today. The tools have changed. It's not LSD and electroshocks anymore. Now it's algorithms, data mining, and our social media feeds. The methods are so much more subtle, but the goal of influencing how we think and act is still there. So the war for the mind isn't over. It just looks different. The question is, who's fighting it now?